If you think back to our first video, we started with a political cartoon. Our old friend Woodrow Wilson carrying the branch that represents the League of Nations, giving it to that incredibly small bird. Shortly after this political cartoon came out, this one also came out. But instead of a small, feeble little bird, we see a huge, monstrous bird attacking Bulgaria and Greece, perhaps giving the impression that the League of Nations was going to change things around. Hi everyone, this is Mr. Trio, and today we are having our conclusion video on Chapter 2, To What Extent Was the League of Nations a Success? We're just going to go through the 4 focus points and take a look at areas that you need to focus on during the time of your review. So the first, how far did the weaknesses in the League's organization make failure inevitable? How successful was the League in the 1920s? How far did the Depression make the work of the League more difficult? And how successful was the League in the 1930s? When we take a look at our first focus point, remember we divided this into 3 areas. The first was organization. Remember all the different commissions and the committees that were organized by the League and how votes took place and how the organization was set up in order to handle many different issues. Not just war and peace issues, but refugee issues, financial issues. It was a multi-dimensional organization. We also talked about the membership, who was allowed to be a member of the League, who wasn't allowed to be a member of the League, and who didn't join the League. When it comes to membership, think about each of the major countries and what was the consequence of whether or not they joined or if they left. For example, we can often point to the United States as being a huge failure in the League of Nations because they did not join. And without having that strong country as a part of the League, it made the League not as strong as well. Also, we talked about collective security. These are the 3 bullets in their gun that they can use as a weapon against bad behavior, shaming, sanctions, financial punishment, and then military punishment. In our second focus point, we talked about 2 major concepts. One is when countries were upset about the results that the League gave them, they often went to outside organizations to try to find a more amiable peace or something that they enjoyed more. Also, countries that were large, powerful countries often were not punished because either they were running the League or they were just too large. So one of the concepts that we discussed is that throughout the 1920s, often the League was a bystander and allowed things to happen. The best example perhaps is the Corfu example, in which Greece and Italy had a dispute and Italy ultimately got large sanctions against Greece for what they did. In the third focus point, we talked about the World Depression and how the World Depression made the work of the League more difficult. It made some countries weak because they were unable to keep up the military that takes a lot of money for nations to produce. It helped to bring extremists to power. Perhaps the best examples are Germany under Adolf Hitler and fascist Italy under Mussolini. It also cut down on sanctions, which was a very important blow to collective security. It was a time of the rise of Japan, and it was a time in which countries sought raw materials in any way that they could find them. Last, we talked about 3 case studies in the 1930s: the invasion of Manchuria, the World Disarmament Conference, and Italy's invasion of Abyssinia. In each of these cases, we could see how the League was unprepared to address the growing threat that these countries represented, and in each case, Japan and Italy, when they were criticized for what they had done, they simply left the League. In the case of the World Disarmament Conference, well, essentially no nation was willing to sign on to an agreement such as this because there was no faith that if they reduced their arms, that other countries would as well. So that's a wrap up of Chapter 2, 4 focus points. Let's talk more in class if you have any questions, and thanks for joining me on this last video.